Another major issue that I'm very passionate about, and I wanted to make sure was available to you guys to watch here in video, is the issue of drugs in our country. The simple fact is that the more that we try to stamp these things down, the more problems that it causes. There's a reason why. We tried prohibition as a country. We tried prohibition of alcohol, a substance well known to cause death, disease, destruction, and many, many, many heartbroken families, including my own family, has struggled with this, okay? We tried banning alcohol, and what do you know? It concentrated power in organized crime. It made it so that ordinary people were criminalized for doing something that before was no big deal. And in total, it made our country a less safe and a less secure place to live. And so, rightly, I think, we repealed the prohibition on alcohol. Now, we have been in what's called a war on drugs for decades now. And unsurprisingly, it has done very little to change the demand for these substances. And here's the reason why. Well, in that time, people have had the ability to study these drugs. They've had the ability to study addiction as a problem. And they've found that addiction is medical and generally not an issue of criminality or, someone choosing to do something. Oftentimes when people get addicted to these substances, it's at their lowest point. It's at a time when they turn to that when nothing else worked. And to me, that sounds like the type of person that needs, say, a counselor, a psychologist, help from an addiction specialist, help from an addiction clinic, and not to be thrown in jail, where, ironically enough, in our prison system, it is relatively easy to obtain whatever drugs that you would like. That doesn't sound like a place where someone is going to be able to kick their habit or improve themselves so that they're able to go and live a more fulfilling life and not need substances to get by. And I know that many of my viewers will be very skeptical of this idea of the policy proposal that I would like to see is decriminalization. So the same way that it's done in Portugal, the same way that many drugs are treated in Canada, for example, where people can come to a clinic, they can get the drugs to be able to get through their day, and they are offered help by the people who work there. We have found through many different studies that around 50% of the people who go to these clinics try treatment. They try getting off the habit. And what a wonderful thing that is. Whereas people who are criminalized for doing these things oftentimes don't kick the habit. And for those of you who are still skeptical, consider that opioids, meaning medicines like morphine, for example, heroin is another one. These opioids, when they were being used in many places populated by people of color, criminalization. Whereas now the opioid crisis is primarily affecting white Americans, and what do you know? It's being treated as a medical issue. It's being treated as, go to your doctor, get help, get treatment for this disease of addiction, rather than people breaking down your door and and arresting you for having opioids. Many people are going to their doctor and getting the help that they need. Now, unfortunately, we do not have a robust enough system for mental health in this country. That is something else that needs to change. But here's the facts. The same way that we treat alcohol and cigarettes is the same way that we should treat most addictive substances. The reason why has everything to do with what I just said, and also it allows taxation of those substances and regulation to make sure that the substances are as safe as they can be. One of the biggest issues right now is people mixing drugs, such as fentanyl, into these other drugs, for potency, for stretching them, whatever. and people will often take more than they intended. This problem does not happen in the clinics that I mentioned around the world. Many of them are in Vancouver, for example, because the drugs have a known quantity, and if the person does overdose, there are nurses and doctors there to take care of the person and to make sure that their life does not end in that tragic way. Now, again, I know this is going to be a controversial topic, and I would like to hear from you about it. I would especially like to hear from people who have recovered from addiction, because it is something that we don't hear enough in the public discourse. Is how do the people that are directly affected by this issue, how do they feel about it? How do they want it to be solved? So please give me a contact if you're interested in talking about it. I'd love to have you on the show. Thank you.